Sarashavasamarampham Shankaracharya Madhyamam Asmaracharya Paryantam Vande Guru Paramparam. Om. Good. Be seated, please. Parameshvara. Very good. Om Sahana Vavatu Sahano Bhunaktu Sahavinyan Karava Vahai Tejasvinavadhitamastu Ma Vitvisha Vahai. Om Shanti Shanti Shanti. Om. Good. There you are. Welcome back to our ongoing study of our Bhagavad Gita, chapter 14. Welcome also to our many students watching online. We'll begin today with recitation, starting with verse 18. And as always, as I'm chanting, read the translation and then repeat after me. Urdhvam gachanti sattvastha, urdhvam gachanti sattvastha, madhye tishtanti rajasaha, madhye tishtanti rajasaha, jaghanya gunavrittistha, jaghanya gunavrittistha, adho gachanti tamasaha, adho gachanti tamasaha, nanyam gunebhyah kartaram, nanyam gunebhyah kartaram, yada drashtanu pashyati, yada drashtanu pashyati, gunebhyascha param veti, gunebhyascha param veti, madbhavam sodi gacchati, madbhavam sodi gacchati, gunan ethanatithyatrin, gunan ethanatithyatrin, dehi deha samudbhavan, dehi deha samudbhavan, janma mrityu jara duhkar, janma mrityu jara duhkar, vimukto mritamashnute, vimukto mritamashnute. Arjuna Vacha, Arjuna Vacha, Karlingais Trin Gunan Hetan, Karlingais Trin Gunan Hetan, Atito Bhavati Prabho, Atito Bhavati Prabho, Kimachara Katam Chaitams, Kimachara katham chaitams, trin gunanati vartate, trin gunanati vartate, Shri Bhagavanu Vacha, Shri Bhagavanu Vacha, prakasham cha nipravrittim cha, prakasham cha pravrittim cha, mohameva cha pandava, mohameva cha pandava, nadveshti sampravrittani, nadveshti sampravrittani, nanivrittani kankshati, nanivrittani kankshati. Very good. So, we have just, with verse 18, concluded a rather lengthy explanation of the three gunas. First, we discussed the three gunas from a more from a more substantial standpoint, treating the three gunas as the fundamental constituents out of which the universe is made. And then Sri Krishna discussed a more conventional understanding of the three gunas as qualities, internal qualities, and especially as qualities of our minds. And he summarizes in the last verse we saw, Urdhvam gachanti sattvastha. Those who are established in sattva, urdhvam gachanti, they go up. Not just in their next life, that can certainly be a reference to going to some heavenly domain in the next life, but even in this life itself, those who have more sattva guna will be blessed also in this life. And I want to reiterate that point. I think I made it briefly, that in modern times we have this idea that good people don't get ahead in life, and I would dispute that very strongly. So the argument goes that those who are too good, they follow the rules too strictly, and as a result, they lose out on opportunities that less ethical people gain by bending the rules, so to speak. So I won't deny the fact that good people who don't bend the rules miss out on certain opportunities that the other people who bend the rules gain. But first of all, there are consequences to bending the rules, right? As many politicians are finding out these days. Sorry for the political comment, but bending rules has consequences. But even more than that, suppose you get away with it, as they say. You don't inside. I mean, you make ethical compromises in life that really determine so much of who you are. If you are a person willing to make ethical compromises, it will permeate your life. You'll be making all kinds of compromises with all kinds of consequences. And finally speaking, you miss out on what life is really about, and that is inner peace and contentment. So if you live a life of making ethical compromises, will you truly be able to find inner peace and contentment? Doubtful, right? So I would say that it's absolutely untrue that good people don't get ahead in life. And Sri Krishna says, Urdhvam gachanti, they advance even in this life. Madhye tishtanti rajasaha, those who have a lot of rajoguna, they stay in the middle, so to speak. And those who are tamasaha, whose lives are dominated by tamas, adho gachanti, they go downwards. Now, before we proceed, a couple of questions and comments. One was a comment, especially about this verse. Sri Krishna seems really judgmental, right? I mean, this is kind of a modern, by the way, especially young people today, they will think like that. Hey, why is Sri Krishna being so judgmental? Live and let live. Well, I think if that's your perspective, you're missing out on the whole idea. Tell me, when you go to your doctor, your primary health care provider, and your doctor tells you you're seriously overweight, is your doctor being judgmental? You're fat. Of course, the doctor won't use the words fat, but still, they're telling you you're overweight. You're fat. My doctor is being judgmental. Come on. So, being judgmental is an assessment which depends on your personal perspective. The doctor is not issuing his judgment about your body. He's making an objective assessment of your health, which is meant to help you. And in fact, if you ignore your doctor's objective assessment, it'll damage your health, right? So here, Sri Krishna is offering this whole teaching, excuse me, this whole teaching of three gunas is not some kind of being judgmental, but rather guiding us to objectively assess ourselves. So the doctor can assess you, but here, Sri Krishna is not assessing you because Sri Krishna is speaking to us through the Bhagavad Gita. So it's up to you to do the assessment based on Sri Krishna's teachings. And that assessment is crucial because it will determine your spiritual health, so to speak. Not your physical health, your spiritual health. Because Sattva Guna will promote your spiritual growth, and to the extent that you have Rajas and Tamas, it will restrict your spiritual growth. But the key word here is objective. And that's where we have to set aside this idea of being judgmental. Judgmental is a personal opinion. Here we're not dealing with personal opinions. We're we must be objective. And in evaluating your own condition, you too must be objective. That means you cannot turn these teachings into an excuse for self-criticism. Self-criticism is self-judgment. Self-criticism and self-judgment is harmful, pulls you down, wears away at your self-esteem, and makes you vulnerable to sadness and depression. The goal here is not to be critical of yourself, to be judgmental of yourself, but to be objective. When the doctor says you're overweight, that's not criticism, right? It's not a judgment. In the same way, when you recognize the presence of Rajas and Tamas within you, if you turn that, what I used that expression before, if you weaponize self-observation. Does that make sense? If you turn self-observation into a weapon against you, and you use that self-observation to criticize, oh, I'm just so tamasic. Oh, I'm just so rajasic, whatever it is. That is not objective. That is self-criticism. That is self-judgment. That is harmful. What we're after here and what Sri Krishna is directing us to do is to evaluate ourselves objectively. Where there's a problem, deal with it. Don't turn it into an opportunity for self-judgment and self-criticism. So everyone has some problems, some defects. Okay, we accept that. We accept it as being a normal part of life, but then we also accept our responsibility to work on our problems. So Rajas and Tamas are, let's be clear, Rajas and Tamas are every bit as natural as Sattva, right? But just because they're natural, we don't want to allow them to dominate our lives. You remember my comment on natural? Everything natural is not good. It's natural that infants don't know how to use a bathroom. Okay, that's natural, but they need to learn how to use the bathroom. In the same way, Rajas and Tamas are absolutely natural, but we have to learn how to deal with them. Okay, enough said. Second, there's one question came by email. Suppose in a family, the lady in the family has sattva guna. Can she influence the man of the family who has rajas to move away from rajas and towards sattva? This is a formula for destroying your marriage. Because any marriage is the substratum, the basis for that marriage is unconditional acceptance. Wherever there's the lack of that unconditional acceptance, marriage will be rocky, and many marriages are. And a big part of it is the inability to accept your spouse exactly as they are. Now, that doesn't mean to make excuses for it. It means to deal with your spouse in an objective way. They have some traits and features that you don't like. Deal with it. But don't turn that into rejection, because that rejection is a wall, a barrier, and it drives couples apart. You know this better than I. But beyond that, there's a more fundamental principle here, and that is, let me put it in a somewhat sarcastic way. How easy is it to change yourself? Suppose there's some rajas, and you want to change yourself. How easy is it? Not easy. So if it's so difficult to change yourself, what hope do you have of changing someone else? It's a ridiculous expectation to think that you have the power to make someone else change. Perhaps the only place this applies is when you're raising young children. And by the way, children stop being young about the age of 9 or 10. So you have that window of opportunity when they're young. You can mold them. But beyond that, forget it. You try to mold your 11 or 12-year-old, good luck. You try to mold or change your spouse, it just doesn't work. We do not have the power to change another person. It's not in our hands. The best thing we can do is be pragmatic, be objective, not get into these big emotional shouting matches. That only makes things worse, as you know very well. But in a best case scenario, you can model the behavior you want the other person to follow. It's a very sophisticated approach. This works especially well with children and teens. You model the behavior you want them to follow. And it can, to some degree, it can work with a spouse. You model the behavior. So if your spouse is shouting a lot, model the behavior you want them to adopt. Don't shout. Right? This is the principle. Okay. Enough said. Okay, with that, we're now at a point in the text where we shift the subject matter. Sri Krishna shifts the subject matter tremendously. So far, we're talking about 3 gunas, and now suddenly he flips the page, so to speak, and we're now going to discuss transcending those 3 gunas. That's our next topic, in fact, to the end of the chapter. The topic is to transcend the 3 gunas. Let's begin. Nanyam gunebhyah kartaram, nanyam gunebhyah kartaram, yada drashtanu pashyati, gunebhyascha param veti, gunebhyascha param veti, madbhavam sodhi gacchati, madbhavam sodhi gacchati. Start in the second line. Yada, when drashta, the seer, the conscious person. When the person anupashyati, understands. When they understand what? First line. When they understand that the kartaram, the agent of action, I'll explain the words first, and then we have a lot to discuss. When they understand that the agent of the action is na anyam, is not other than gunebhyaha, not other than the gunas. This is the typical double negative. Your grammar teachers told you never to use double negatives, but they're used in literature all the time. So he says, when you understand that the agent of action is not other than, not other is the double negative. So not other than the gunas, meaning the agent of action is the gunas. Now, what does that mean? And to understand that, we have to go back to our discussion in a prior chapter, chapter 13, where we had an extensive discussion about Prakriti and Purusha, and using the Vedantic definitions of those terms. Purusha is consciousness, your true self, and Prakriti, nature. By the way, Prakriti is always defined as Trigunatmaka, having three gunas. Prakriti, as we said, in ancient times, they understood nature not in terms of matter and energy as we do today. In ancient times, they understood nature in terms of sattva, rajas, and tamas, prakriti. So this is to remind us of our prior discussion about the distinction between purusha, consciousness, the essence of who you are, and prakriti, nature, the three gunas, which describes everything else about you. Consciousness, actually, we'll come to consciousness in a moment. Your body is made of gunas, primarily tamas. Since tamas, the guna of tamas, is that from which material things come, matter comes from tamas. So here we have lots of tamas. You get the point? And then also here we have powers of action, rajas, prana, breathing, circulation of your blood, etc. Rajas, lots of it. By the way, are those good things or bad things? So, this is nature. We have our bodies are natural. They're naturally made of tamas. The life force, prana, that makes us alive is natural, but it is a manifestation of rajas. There's no problem. We'll come to the problem. There is a problem, but the problem is not the fact that the body is tamasic and your prana is rajasic. That is not the problem. We'll find the problem in just a moment. We have to finish up here. Sattva. Your mind is primarily sattvika. All of our mental faculties are primarily, notice that word primarily, mostly, meaning not completely. Meaning that the sattva guna in our minds is tainted by rajas and tamas, and that's a problem that we've discussed a lot in the earlier part of this chapter. That's the part we want to reduce. Now, what about consciousness? So far we're talking about prakriti, nature, in the form of three gunas, in the manifest as your body, your mind, your senses, your prana, etc. What about consciousness? Let's be very clear. Does consciousness have tamas? Obviously not. Does consciousness have rajas? Of course not. But you might get tripped up on this one. Does consciousness have sattva guna? Good. And if you said no, good. Because sattva guna is a property of nature. Sattva guna belongs to prakriti, not to consciousness. Consciousness is, to use Sri Krishna's language, guna atita, beyond the gunas. Consciousness is free from gunas. This is our fundamental distinction that we made in the prior chapter again and again, the distinction between knower and known. The known includes three gunas. The knower is free from the gunas. The knower is consciousness, prakriti. We use the term kshetrajna, the knower of the field of experience, without gunas, as opposed to nature, prakriti, kshetra, the field of experience, which is all gunas. So, your true self, consciousness, the essence of who you are, and again, when I use that word consciousness, it's so crucial that you don't turn it into an abstract concept. This consciousness, the consciousness. There's no this consciousness. There's no the consciousness. There's only you. When we use the term consciousness, we're talking about you in a fundamental sense. The essence of who you are is consciousness. The essence of who you are is not a philosophical concept, right? Okay, enough said. That consciousness has no sattva, rajas, or tamas. That consciousness is truly guna atita, beyond the gunas. But here comes the problem. And the problem that we've discussed many times in this class, including back in chapter 13, in fact, especially in chapter 13, we said that when you confuse the two, Purusha and Prakriti, when you confuse, when I put it in these terms, it sounds ridiculous. Can you mix up knower and known? Does that sound like something you can easily mix up? Knower and known? They sound so utterly different, right? Knower and known. But if you say, I am a man, or I am a woman, you've mixed up knower and known, right? Because knower is consciousness. As consciousness is neither male nor female, maleness and femaleness belongs to the physical body. Physical body is known. You are the knower. Body is known. So when you say, I am male or female, you've managed to mix up knower and known. Huge confusion. And that huge confusion is the root, not root cause, it is the direct cause for suffering. Root cause is ignorance, we'll talk about that another time, but the direct cause for your suffering is this confusion between you and not you, I and not I. And specifically, when you identify yourself with the physical body, the problems of your physical body become your problems. The body has problems, but those problems belong to the body and not to consciousness. The essence of you is consciousness. Consciousness doesn't have physiological problems, nor does consciousness have psychological problems. Minds have plenty of psychological problems. In fact, I think it would be fair to say that there is no such thing as a mind that is 100% free of psychological problems. They're innate. Just as the body is imperfect and subject to physiological problems, every mind is inherently imperfect and subject to all kinds of psychological problems. The suffering comes when you identify with the body, you own the problems. When you identify with the mind, you own those problems. And just this is a story I told years ago. I don't think I've told it for a long time. So you're finished shopping at the mall, and you're going to the parking lot to your car. You notice that in the parking lot, there's a car of the same make and model as yours, parked right next to yours. And you're not sure which car is yours. Then you notice that one of the cars has a broken tail light. So it was hit in the parking lot. So as you walk closer and closer to the car, you're thinking, gosh, I hope it's not my car that has the broken taillight. Now notice, the broken taillight is a problem that belongs to the car, not to you. But if you are identified with your car, which you are, you call it my car, right? That minus of your car is identification. And when you have that identification with the car, you will suffer if the car has a problem like a broken taillight. Notice if you discover it's the other guy's car that has a broken taillight, no problem. In fact, you're happy. That's not nice. Somebody's got a broken taillight and you're happy. You're happy, you're relieved. That is not your car. Notice, though, that the broken taillight, if it belongs to a car to which you're not, this is a little technical, pay attention. If the broken taillight belongs to a car to which you have no attachment, who cares? Broken taillight belongs to the car. If you're attached, you have a problem. If you're not attached, no problem. Body has the equivalent of broken taillights. Mind has the equivalent of broken taillights. Problems. When whatever you're identified with is a source of suffering, you are the knower, completely independent of the known. This is how Vedanta solves the problem of human suffering. You've heard me say so many times, Vedanta is a solution to the problem of human suffering, and it solves that problem in this way by breaking your false identification with your body and mind, etc., and your car, so that you won't suffer due to the problems of your body, due to the problems of your mind, or even due to the problems of your car. You won't suffer if you're free from identification. So this is what Sri Krishna is referring to here. Yada drashta, seer, knower, consciousness. When you, the conscious person, when you anupashyati, when you understand, when you really get it, to use the American idiom, when you get it that kartaram, the one who is engaged in activity, who is that? Body, mind, senses, prana, emotions, this individual person. When you understand that this, which is involved in activities, is nothing but gunas, and those gunas are separate from you. In fact, that's what he continues to say. He says, guna in the third line, gunebhyaha cha param veti. Cha, and when you veti, when you know what is param, beyond, gunebhyaha, beyond the gunas. Beyond the gunas means consciousness, your true nature, the knower. So the known has gunas, The knower has no gunas. Beyond the gunas, we're going to see the term guna atita in just a moment. So when you get it, when you understand the difference between you, consciousness, and the body, mind, and senses, when you understand the utter difference, complete separation between the two. Not only complete separation, but one doesn't affect the other. We've given the example so many times. The sun shines on a holy temple, the sun doesn't become more holy. The sun shines on a heap of garbage, the sun doesn't become tainted. In the same way, your consciousness is utterly unaffected by the problems of the body and mind. So veti, when you get it, when you understand that which is param, that which is beyond the gunas, then saha, in the last line, saha, that person, the same as we had in the meditation session, saha, that person, mad bhavam, Sri Krishna says, my state, adhigacchati, that person reaches my state. My state meaning that inner divinity. And this, again, connects quite a bit with our meditation session. That inner divinity is consciousness. That consciousness is beyond the gunas, utterly unaffected by the problems of the body and mind. So when you understand this, and the point that we're going to see here and several more times is, how do you reach, so Sri Krishna says, that person reaches my state, madbhavam adhigacchati. How do you reach Sri Krishna's state? We've already said that it's an already existent fact. Your true nature is already divine, has always been divine, as we've said before. Tat-tvamasi is in the present tense. The rishis never said you will become that. You already are that. Then how do you reach Sri Krishna's state? By recognizing that you're already there. And that's what he's going to describe further as we continue. Gunan etan atityatrin, gunan etan atityatrin, dehi deha samudbhavan, dehi deha samudbhavan, janma mrityu jara dukkhair, janma mrityu jara dukkhair, vimukto mritam ashnute. Start in the second line again. Dehi is the one inhabiting the body and refers to consciousness. Dehi means the consciousness which dwells within without being affected by the body. So that Dehi, that consciousness, first line, middle, you have to break the words apart. They're all jammed together. Gunan etan atitya. Atitya is a word we're looking for. Having transcended. Dehi, consciousness. Atitya, having transcended what? Etan, these. Trin, three. Gunan, these three gunas. Consciousness, having transcended these three gunas. Transcended in what sense? Separate. Knower and known. That's separate. So consciousness, having transcended these gunas which are in the second line, deha samudbhavan. These gunas which are born of the body, these gunas which are associated with your physical body, stula sharira, associated with your subtle body, sukshma sharira. These gunas are associated with your body, mind, and senses, and prana. But when given the fact that consciousness atitya, is independent of the gunas of the body, mind, and senses. By understanding that, last line, vimuktaha, that consciousness is vimukta, independent, literally free from. That consciousness is vimukta, free from what? Third line, free from janma, birth, free from mrityu, death, free from jara, old age, free from dukkha, all kinds of suffering. Recognizing that your true self as consciousness transcends the gunas, means transcends the body and mind. Through that understanding, you become free from the body of mind and mind. You know that the broken taillight belongs to the other guy's car. You recognize that the problems of your body belong to the body. You know that the problems of your mind belong to your mind. And you recognize that no problems whatsoever belong to you, the conscious being. In this way, amritam ashnute, ashnute, one enjoys. Amritam, literally immortality, but it's like a code word here for moksha, liberation. You are freed from all suffering. Now there's an important point to be made here. And actually this was a nice discussion in our satsang last week. I'd like to share it with all of you. And that is, sometimes we get the wrong idea about how we become free from suffering due to your body and mind. Tell me, if your car has a broken taillight, and it is my car, so you're identified with your car, is the solution to sell your car? Doesn't make sense, right? You're identified with your car. If the car has a broken taillight, get rid of it, because it's a source of suffering. It's your car, it has a broken taillight, get rid of it. Well, this misinterpretation can creep into spiritual life. I am not my body. What exactly does that mean? If you misinterpret that statement, I am not this body, my doctor says I'm overweight, but I'm not my body. Who cares? That's a problem, right? Yeah, besides, my body is going to go away in a few years anyway. Why should I bother taking care of it? This is unhealthy thinking, and a kind of unhealthy thinking that kind of seeps into spiritual life. The example we discussed in our satsang is a famous spiritual person from North India. I won't use the name, but some of you will figure out. She lived in North India and passed away about 70 years ago. And she had a way of saying, this is not hungry. I'm sorry, this is hungry. This is tired. This is hungry. She wouldn't say, I am hungry. She said, this is hungry. Now, I don't dispute her being enlightened, but why that language? This is hungry. To me, that language points to an unhealthy disassociation with the body. To disassociate with your body, as the example I just said, I am not my body. My doctor tells me I'm overweight, but it's my body that's overweight. I don't care. This is an unhealthy disassociation with the body. And that disassociation is so unhealthy, it actually is a psychological diagnosis. They call it dissociative disorder. It's mental illness. You walk into a psychologist's office and say, I am not my body. That doctor will write down that diagnosis. Patient suffers from dissociative disorder. Okay, let's be clear. Vedanta is not about creating an unhealthy disassociation with your body and mind, but rather it's all about creating a healthy, objective relationship with your body and mind. And it is a relationship. There's a relationship between knower and known. Two things having a relationship. Consciousness is in some kind of relationship with body and mind. Let's not deny the relationship, but let's just be objective about that relationship. If the car has a broken taillight, the problem belongs to the car. If the body is overweight, the problem belongs to the body. If the mind is sad, the problem belongs to the mind. But if it's your car, it has a broken taillight, get it fixed. What's the big deal, right? If it's your car, there's a responsibility to take care of that car. In fact, it's against the law to drive a car with a broken taillight. So get the car fixed. It's pragmatism. Notice if it's my car, going back to our earlier idea, if you're identified with the car, the taillight becomes a problem. In fact, I've used this recently, I think in this class. And my teacher had a nice way of saying that Vedanta turns problems into situations. And this is very well said, and this is a good place to apply that teaching. If your broken taillight is a problem, it makes you upset. If it's a situation, you take care of it pragmatically. If your body is overweight, it could be a problem. Oh, I'm so fat. But if you have a healthy, detached relationship, objective relationship with your body, then it's not a problem, it's a situation. It's a situation that needs attention. Take care of it. Similarly, sadness in the mind. It can be a problem, but with the help of these teachings, problems are converted into situations. If you have thousands of problems, life sounds grim. If you have thousands of situations, okay, you deal with them. So let's be very clear that whatever are the problems associated with your car, associated with your body, associated with your mind, those problems, notice my language is already a problem. Based on what we just said, those problems are not problems. Those problems are situations that need appropriate attention. This is Vedanta. We convert these problems into situations. Let's continue. So Sri Krishna said, use that language. Sri Krishna said, gunan atitya, transcending the gunas. So here Arjuna, that perked up his attention. So Arjuna asks, Arjuna uvacha, kairlingais trin gunan hetan, kairlingais trin gunan hetan, atito bhavati prabho, kimachara katam chaitans, Trin gunanati vartate. In the second line, Prabho, O Master, O Krishna, Arjuna asks, Atitaha bhavati, one who has transcended, transcended what? First line, trin, actually, etan at the end, etan trin gunan. These three gunas. And as I said before, words are typically not in prose order when they're found in verses because you have to conform to certain rules of meter. So be ready for words not being in conventional prose order. So atitaha bhavati, one who has transcended etan trin gunan, these three gunas, O Krishna, kaihi lingaihi. What are the signs of such a person? How can such a person be recognized? What should I look for? What are the signs that demonstrate that a person has transcended the gunas? Kim acharaha in the third line. How will that person act? You've heard me joke before, that person walks, but the feet remain about 4 inches above the ground. Silliness. But Arjuna has this question. In fact, he had the same question, if you remember, back in chapter 2, when he was talking about the sthita prajna, the enlightened person whose wisdom is firm. So Arjuna asked, kimasita, how does a person sit? Vrajeta kim, and how does a person move about? Again, you sit but 4 inches above. So Arjuna has some funny ideas, and Sri Krishna addresses that. Arjuna has one more question. Excuse me. He says, Katam, how, etan trin, these gunan, these three gunas, ativartate. How does that person transcend the gunas? What is the means by which that person transcends the gunas? And we'll see here Sri Krishna's response. Shri Bhagavanu Vacha, Shri Bhagavanu Vacha, Prakasham cha pravrittim cha, Prakasham cha pravrittim cha, Mohameva cha Pandava, Mohameva cha Pandava, Nadveshti sampravrittani, Nadveshti sampravrittani, Nanivrittani kankshati, Nanivrittani kankshati. And Sri Krishna gives a brilliant response. Yeah. So first of all, he says, Prakash, he uses words which may be surprising. Instead of saying sattva guna, he uses the word prakasham, light. Instead of rajas, he uses the word pravritti, action. Instead of the word tamas, he uses the word moham, delusion. Why does he do that? He can do anything he wants. This is poetry. Sometimes we forget. This is not a textbook. This is poetry. So he describes the three gunas poetically as prakasha, light, pravritti, action, and moha, delusion. Pandava, O Arjuna, he says, the one who na dveshti, who doesn't hate, he doesn't regret any of these three gunas, he doesn't regret them, sampravrittani, when they arise, I'll just give you the words and then we'll talk about it, and nivrittani, and when any of those three go away, na kankshati, he doesn't long after them. So let me explain what Sri Krishna is saying here. Let's be a little bit more specific. Third line, na dveshti. The one who is guna atita, beyond the gunas, na dveshti, doesn't regret or doesn't resent sampravrittani, specifically rajas and tamas. The enlightened person doesn't get doesn't resent the appearance of rajas and tamas in his or her mind. I wanted to say that again because Sri Krishna is making such an important point here. An enlightened person, one who is beyond the gunas, does not get disappointed. I'm going to paraphrase. The enlightened person doesn't get disappointed when tamas or rajas arises in the mind, nor does that enlightened person, nakangshati, long for sattva guna when sattva guna nivrittani goes away. There's something so important here. The enlightened person doesn't, just to be very casual language, the enlightened person doesn't mind it when rajas and tamas arise. The enlightened person doesn't mind it, so to speak, when sattva guna goes away. Now you think, wait a minute, who are we talking about here? We're talking about an enlightened person. One who is yet to be enlightened should absolutely be engaged working to minimize rajas and tamas and working to maximize sattva guna, because the lack of sattva guna and a presence of tamas and rajas are impediments to enlightenment. So the unenlightened person should very much be concerned about the nature of the mind. As we've said many times, the problem is in the mind, the solution is going to be in the mind, so the nature of your mind is crucial. An enlightened person cannot afford to ignore the condition of the mind, but we're not talking about an unenlightened person here. Sri Krishna is talking about the one who is guna atita, beyond the three gunas, specifically meaning one who is enlightened. One who is enlightened has already gone to the end of the road, so to speak. So the concern over the condition of the mind comes to an end. So therefore, when the enlightened person observes a problem in the mind, and this is so important. And just to illustrate this, I've told this anecdote before, but maybe not for a long time. I used to have this problem. What was the problem? I wanted my mind to be sattvika all the time, and I wanted my mind to be completely free from rajas and tamas. The term that I used, I went and spoke to my guru about this, and the terms I used was this: Swamiji, when will my mind perfectly abide in the truth of these teachings? My language was something like this. And his answer surprised me. His answer was, you will be perfectly abiding in these teachings when you stop worrying so much about your mind. Which is exactly Sri Krishna's message here. The enlightened person doesn't care if rajas and tamas comes. Who cares? It's just the mind. What's it to me? If sattva decreases, it's just the mind. What's it to me? Now again, be careful. We're talking about an enlightened person here. An enlightened person who has already reached the end of the road. The sadhana, the spiritual practice, has fulfilled its purpose and come to an end. Therefore, the enlightened person can just laugh at your own mind. What a wonderful trait, even in a worldly sense, the ability to laugh at ourselves. Such a wonderful value, being able to laugh at ourselves. You understand it at a worldly level. We don't take ourselves so seriously. We're able to acknowledge our own defects and laugh. You say, "Kya karenge?" What can be done? That kind of attitude. Just a very pragmatic acceptance of the flaws that are innate in every single person. So why should we not be able to laugh at ourselves and take it lightly? Well, that's at a worldly level. The enlightened person just takes it up one level, so to speak, and the enlightened person laughs at the mind. Look at that. How silly this mind is. To me, that's a very clear way of describing the enlightened person's relationship with the mind. As we said, there still is a relationship between knower and known, relationship between consciousness and body, mind, senses. That relationship continues, but what is the nature of that relationship? As we said earlier, where there's attachment, there's suffering. And where there's a complete absence of attachment, I used the word attachment, we've been using the word identification, which is the right word here. Where there's identification with the body, mind, and senses, there's suffering. The enlightened person is utterly free from that identification. So therefore, we laugh. The enlightened person says, look how silly the mind is. There's actually a principle in believe it or not, there are scholars who analyze humor and try to understand, how does humor work? Why do we laugh at what we laugh at? And in slapstick comedy, when you see somebody fall, generally we don't laugh, right? If somebody falls and hurts themselves, you don't laugh. But in a slapstick comedy routine, we laugh because we know no one really got hurt. You don't take it seriously. If somebody really falls, you take it seriously. But when a comedian falls, you don't take it seriously and you laugh. When you don't take yourself so seriously, we can laugh at our mistakes. And I just want to reiterate how wonderful it is to come to the point in life where we can laugh at our mistakes. Often it comes with age, when we're younger, it's a little bit different, but hopefully with age and maturity, we can understand we've all made terrible blunders in life, and we have a few years left. We can make a few more. And the point I'm making is to acknowledge how normal that is. We all make terrible blunders in life, so we can accept it and even learn to laugh at ourselves for the stupid things we've done in our lives. Not to take ourselves so seriously in a worldly sense is a great value, great character. And for the enlightened person, has the same attitude towards the mind. Whatever the mind does, it's not taken seriously. It's just another part of nature. You see a little child doing all kinds of little things. The mind is like that little child. It just runs around and does its own silly things. The enlightened person says, look what that silly mind is doing now. On the other hand, when that little child is running towards the street, you stop that child because something harmful could happen. In the same way, if the enlightened person observes something harmful going on here, They'll take care of it in a pragmatic way. That's a responsibility. Okay, this is a good place to conclude today. Some brief announcements. I put out another new video. This one is on, I've forgotten already. What was the last one? Karma. It says, karma, your past is not your future. So many people misunderstand the doctrine of karma as a doctrine of predestination, which it absolutely is not. So you can watch that video. Your karma, your past is not your future. So watch that video. Tomorrow, Sunday, we have our Vedanta class, Upadesha Sahasri, and we're starting another new chapter. Also, it's important I should mention that we're changing the timing of our classes on Sunday. We had been meeting for Vedanta class at 11 and satsang at 12. Many students thought it was too late, so we're shifting 1 hour earlier. Our Vedanta class starting tomorrow will meet at 10 o'clock. And then our satsang will begin at 11 o'clock. And you're free to come just for the satsang. So Vedanta class at 10 and satsang at 11. We'll conclude with our brief prayers at the altar. Om Gananahan Tva Ganapatigam Avamahe Kaving Gavinam Upamashravastamam Jeshtarajam Brahmanam Brahmanaspatahana Shrinvan Utabasira Saranam Om Mahaganapataye Namaha Ishvaro Gururatmeti Murti Bheda Vibhagine Vyoma Vadvyapta Dehaya Dakshina Murtaye Namaha Vasudeva Sutam Devam Kamsa Chanuramardanam Devaki Paramanandam Krishnam Vande Jagadguru Om Sarve Bhavantu Sukhinaha Sarve Santu Niramayaha Sarve Bhadrani Pashyantu Ma Kaschid Dukkha Bhag Bhavet Asato Ma Sadgamaya Tamaso Ma Jyotirgamaya Mrityorma Hamratangamaya Om Shanti 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 Om Tat Sat.